YouTube also.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so today's lesson is coming from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 21, entitled Instructions by Maharaja Prithu. This is text number 45. So I'll read the Sanskrit, and then I'll read the translation and purport. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nirpatim Pitrikdeva Dvijatayaha Tustuyu Hrista Manasa Sadhu Vadena Sadavaha. Translation. The great sage Maitreya said, after hearing King Prithu speak so nicely, all the demigods, the denizens of Pritaloka, the brahmanas, and the saintly persons present at the meeting congratulated him by expressing their goodwill. Srila Prabhupada's purport. When a person speaks very nicely at a meeting, he is congratulated by the audience, who express their goodwill with the words sadhu, sadhu. This is called sadhu vada. All the saintly persons, pitas, denizens of Pitraloka, and demigods who were present at the meeting and heard Prithu Maharaj express their goodwill with the words sadhu, sadhu. They all accepted the good mission of Prithu Maharaj and were then fully satisfied. Om Gyan Timirandasya Ganajana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Staptitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Dadati Swam Padantikam Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Satarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is one of the later verses in this chapter, practically at the end of the chapter. Instructions by Maharaj Prithu. Previously we heard verses describing the glories of the persons at the assembly. Being a king, he realizes his position in relationship to others, and mostly he understands he is the servant of the citizens. So he begs for blessings from the Brahmanas, from the Vaishnavas, from all the saintly persons present. He understands that the blessings of the great souls is the success of his ruling the kingdom in a way that is pleasing to the Supreme Lord and to all the praja, the citizens. Now, after speaking so many words, his good qualities have been noted by all. And one of the things that's mentioned here, which is the fundamental principle of today's verse, is that he spoke so nicely, and everyone congratulated him and expressed their goodwill. Um, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains different austerities. There are the austerities of the body, the austerities of the mind, and the austerities of speech. Uh, and Krishna lists these different austerities. And then the austerities of speech, he says one should speak truthfully and beneficially. One should avoid speech that offends, and one should recite the Vedas regularly. So this is called proper communication or proper expression. So this is a principle that allows for what we say a maximum amount of receptivity to those who are hearing what is being spoken. Speak truthfully, avoid sophistry, avoid, duplicity, avoid hypocrisy, avoid harshness of speech. These are things that are being ruled out automatically by the positive, speaking truthfully, and in other words, and beneficially. Beneficially means for the benefit of those you're communicating to. So beneficially may be a broad definition in the sense that what depends on the audience. But in this particular case, he glorifies all of those personalities who are there in the assembly. And by their glorification, he becomes what we say an opportunity, or he becomes a personality who wants to be heard. He wants to be heard. This is actually one of the etiquettes for approaching great souls, is that you speak some of their glories, some of their qualities, and say something before you actually make your point within the speech. So he does that. And one of the things he asks for their blessings, their goodwill. And they're more than happy to express it. So nowadays, we find that people don't take these things into consideration. A lot of times people just speak what's on their mind, not considering the receptivity of the person, or speaking in such a way as to want to forcibly put their opinion upon others. This kind of speech usually blocks communication or causes dissension on the other side. And so therefore, we find today that although people speak a lot, they can't communicate. And we find it everywhere. And because a lot of times people speak about the wrong things, or they speak in such a way as they're always putting forth their own agenda. Therefore, speech is a very important point. Chanakya Pandit says that in this world there are three very desirable things. He says food, water, and soft speech. He makes this point. One who speaks softly and also one who speaks with the benefit of others is speaking in such a way that the people want to listen and their points will be seriously accepted and taken. There was an incident in our Krishna Conscious Society. The incident refers to a particular pastime in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There was one Brahmana, and very learned, and also a great personality. His name was Vallabha Acharya. He had a lot of regard for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he also was a great scholar. He had made statements in regard to one other great personality who was the original commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that was Sridhar Swami. So he said certain things that weren't pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu responded in such a way as to defeat everything he said and reject everything he said. And so this was going on quite regularly. Although he was very learned, he had one problem. He was proud. And Mahaprabhu could detect this pride coming through everything he did. Although everything he said was what we might say philosophically correct, but that pride sort of polluted the whole uh, knowledge that he was trying to communicate. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu noted that, and very, what we say, systematically, and sometimes very strongly, was revealing his ignorance by defeating what he said in order to smash his pride. Now, this went on for some time. And then, of course, uh, later on in the Krishna consciousness movement, um, the devotees had read this particular pastime and wrote an article in Back to Godhead magazine describing this pastime and also narrating it in such a way as to show that uh, Vallabhacharya was not so much accepted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This article was read by one personality named Sumati Murariji. Sumati Murariji was the person who had given Prabhupada the voyage across the ocean. She owned that Scindia steamliner. And so Prabhupada was very much indebted to her. And she was a disciple or a follower of Vallabhacharya. Vallabhacharya actually had created his own sampradaya, Pushti Marg, I think. Yeah, Pushti Marg. And so when she read the article, she was very much offended because her guru was minimized in the article. And so she wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada expressing her dissatisfaction of what the article had said. Prabhupada very carefully and very sensitively, with great sensitivity, he responded to their letter, explaining how his disciples were somewhat neophyte and they didn't understand the etiquette. Although they had correctly explained the pastime according to the scriptures, still Prabhupada took issue on the way they did it. And he quoted a particular saying, Satyam Priyam, Satyam Bruyam, that one must speak the truth in a pleasing way. Satyam Priyam, Priya means pleasing, Satyam Bruyam. So he responded to Sumati Maharaji's letters in trying to apologize for his disciples who didn't know the etiquette and how to present this controversy in the proper way, which caused dissension. And so this was an important point to understand. So sometimes it's not always possible, or at times it's not always possible, to speak something that is truthfully to someone who you may want to convince of something otherwise or communicate otherwise. But automatically, when the speech is pleasing and it's done with sensitivity and regard for the person, then what we say, the transmission of the knowledge becomes more and more, what we say, communicatable, or what we say, receptible, like that. So here we find that King Prithu, he's speaking so nicely, and he's also speaking pleasingly. He's speaking nice words, and he's also speaking in a very nice way. So this is one of the qualities in the age of Kali that is being destroyed by our society. The modes of passion and ignorance are becoming more and more prevalent within society. And people have lost the etiquette on how to communicate. And sometimes people just speak very harshly, very rudely, very offensively, and expect that that is all is required. But you find that that causes what we say a blockage in transmission and causes the other person to become um, unhappy. I was just in Boston, and I was one girl. She was telling me that just recently one devotee came, and he was giving a seminar on speech. And one of the things one should avoid in speaking, and one of the things one should include in their speaking, and one of the things that should be avoided is personal agenda. In other words, one is trying to uh, gain something from this particular, what we say, communication. And the communication should be more as a source of information or a source of reciprocation or a source of bringing about reciprocation in such a way that everything ends, even though there may be disagreement, it should end on a sweet note. Or it should end in such a way as the persons are not so much unhappy with the results as opposed to what is being said. So what does that mean? That a lot of times you can say things that are unpleasant, but if you say them nicely or sweetly, they have a better chance of being accepted.
Being received and accepted.
What did you say?
Being received and accepted. Being received and accepted by others.
Being received and accepted by others. Yeah. So we see as Kali Yuga progresses, Manda Sumanda Mateo Manya Bhaga Upadrataha, that people become more and more affected by the bad qualities of this age. And therefore, one of the things that is being lost is the ability to communicate effectively. And sometimes communication is not even there. People assume, or what we say, conjecture, what happens in a situation without even communicating the persons involved. We find that also happens. When lack of communication is there, then assumptions automatically occur, and sometimes, and most of the time, assumptions are without enough knowledge of the situation. And so a lot of times this causes dissension. Sometimes this dissension, or what we say, miscommunication or misunderstanding, I think that is a better word, automatically occurs just by situations. There was one little pastime in the life of Srila Prabhupada where Prabhupada would like to greet guests, and when he was in the temple. And so when some, what we say, guests would come, and especially if this guest was very, what we say, important or respectable, Prabhupada would go out of his way to make sure that the guest got everything that they needed. And so one time he welcomed one guest into the temple, and Prabhupada turned to his brahmachari assistant, who happened to be there, and said, go get him some prasadam. So the boy immediately left and went into the pujari room to look for Maha. It just so happens that the pujari had just put the plates on the altar, and it was about to do he had done the offering, he was about to do his Gayatri. And the boy came. The pujari said, well, you'll have to wait until the offering is over, and then prasadam will be available. So the boy returned to Prabhupada and explained, and Prabhupada said, no, you go get it now. So he went back into the pujari room. At that time, the pujari was chanting his Gayatri. He walked right past the pujari, onto the altar, and picked up the plate, and came off the altar. You can imagine how fast that Gayatri was for the pujari. And so he chased after the devotee who was walking with the plate towards Prabhupada, and they both arrived at Prabhupada. So obviously the pujari was quite upset, but he said he didn't see the whole picture. He didn't see the whole picture, nor was it possible to communicate, or the boy didn't communicate everything until he actually understood everything from Prabhupada. So sometimes situations cause what we say dissension because of lack of understanding. I think that happens a lot in married life. We assume things. Familiarity breeds what we say indifference, and we assume that the wife will do everything that the husband wants, and we assume that the husband will do everything that the wife wants, or we assume that the husband will not do anything that the wife doesn't want, and vice versa. So the assumptions sometimes automatically are in place, and what happens when the assumption is breached because of lack of communications, then all of a sudden there is an increase in the atmosphere of the energy, and then communications turn into something different. So a lot of times because of lack of communication, then there is a breakdown of information and understanding. And a lot of times people don't really understand the situation, and therefore enemies are made. Just like there's one story that's told by one great devotee in our movement where husband and wife were fighting, and they decided, well, this is the end of this relationship, so we're going to get a divorce. But then they decided, let's try some marriage counseling first. So they went to the marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor was quite good. And he finally understood what was the problem. And the man revealed it. He said, she makes bread for me, and when she cuts the bread, she gives me the end piece and keeps all the other pieces for herself. This proves she doesn't love me. And she does this all the time when she makes bread. So she doesn't love me. Okay. So then it was further investigated that the wife happens to be coming from the Italian country. She's Italian. And the culture in Italy is that when you make bread, you give the end piece to the guest because that's the best piece. The husband didn't know that, although he was married to his Italian wife. And she never explained it. So then when that was revealed, the marriage somehow stayed together. So sometimes we see when there is a lack of communication, or there's a lack of proper communication, I think that's just more relevant to what we're saying here, there automatically causes misunderstanding and breakdown of relationships. That's why it says that before you start any endeavor, whether it's in the family, it's in the workplace, or it's in society in general, the first principle is to talk about it and have everybody clear about what is needed in order for everything to move in the direction you want it to move it. So we see that a lot of things are assumed. Now, here's another point that we can look at, that when a person is speaking philosophical teachings, they don't explain everything they speak about. They speak sometimes in PowerPoint presentations, giving sutras, verses, and points of information. And a lot of times if people don't ask questions or don't get clarifications on what is said, they may assume that this person has got the wrong motivation or is not speaking correctly, either one. So therefore, in that type of arena, questions are necessary. And I think as you go on here, you'll find that Maharaj Prithu is further glorified for his saintly qualities. And then there is a discussion. So a person, especially in a position of leadership, has to be a good communicator. Or if he's not, because of some lack of character, he should keep someone who is his right-hand man, to use a cliche, as one who is a good communicator. And so that person can be the liaison between the person and the people he's trying to reach, like that. And that person has to be good at communications and between both parties, like that. So, yeah. So that's one of the major breakdowns, or the cause of breakdowns in relationships today. Lack of proper communications, both in the way it's being spoken and many times in what is being spoken. But the way it's being spoken is even more important, because if one is sensitive to the feelings of the other person, then the message has greater effect upon the receiver. In other words, the receptivity is increased, what we say, significantly. Okay, I wanted to make that point because I see that wherever we go, there is a difficult people have to communicate with each other. And therefore there is so much misunderstanding in today's world. Okay, thank you. And I'll take questions if there are any.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam, Followers to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. If anybody have any questions, please go ahead. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam, Followers to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. This is Lavanya from Dallas. Thank you so much for the lecture class. This is Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
It's always nice to hear from Krishna Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Candramauli, Swami. This is Gail. I'm just saying Hare Krishna to you.
Hare Krishna, Gail. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for your class.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think it's such an important topic. This communication, and not making the point about not making assumptions. I find that it's such a rampant epidemic in our communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because people have their interpretations, their mind's interpretations about what's going on in the other person's mind, and they see that as like the absolute truth, never entertaining the thought that there could be some other motive or a thought process behind the other person's actions or speech,
Yeah.
And people just run with that, So I just find that to be a very
It's prominent.
pervasive problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, in communication.
Mm-hmm.
I see it all the time.
Well, one of the
I'm
things,
glad you brought.
one of the things that I find is that people are good at speaking, but not good at listening.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
And listening is the
And
base.
very attached to their own, interpretations or perspective of situations. Very attached to that, and it's like that's the absolute truth, just because that's what their mind came up with.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, also the
Well, to overcome that, it's called
non-listening.
to overcome that is called emphatic listening or empathic hearing. One is listening with a way trying to understand the feelings and the moods behind the words and not just the words itself. Yeah. So when that's there, then one can communicate or respond properly. So we actually have seminars in our society called, how to listen properly, emphatic, because the mind is full of thoughts, and while we're speaking, we're not ready to listen. Sometimes we even use a joking thing that you see some 2 or 3 people are all speaking at the same time. Nobody's hearing anybody. Everybody's just speaking. So it becomes quite, because
How did that go? Two or three people or
are
what?
all speaking at the same time.
How does the joke go?
And then, everyone is oblivious to what everyone else is saying. They're just absorbed in what they're saying. And that's a more of a ridiculous situation, but it does happen. So the whole basis of relationship is communication.
Oh yes.
And the basis of problem solving is what we say, proper communication. But it's 2 sides. It's not just speaking, it's hearing. Because without hearing properly, one cannot also respond properly.
Yeah, it just sounds so basic.
Yeah, but because we live in a very passionate lifestyle, we're going through life in that way also. There's a running through life. Sometimes people are just part of that running process. And that's very much prominent in what we say highly advanced countries, where you find in more simplified societies, there's more personalism, there's more ability to communicate. It's just a feature of our, highly technical industrial society, where everything is so fast-paced.
Do you mind if I switch gears a little bit, Maharaj?
Yeah.
To your prison ministry?
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious about, for one thing, do you preach in like those hardcore prisons, and if so, what are they able to actually do in Krishna consciousness in such places?
Well, the jails, and especially in the U.S., of course, I also preach in other countries, but in the U.S., you find that there are different levels of confinement, all the way up to what we say high-level security, depending on the level of crimes committed. So I find that each jail somewhat has its own, what we say, modus operandi, according to how they want to run the thing. They're pretty much given what we say free reign on how they organize things, especially with the external world. We don't do anything different from one type of jail to another. We speak Krishna consciousness in a very simplified and basic way where people can be understand. We emphasize the importance of chanting, reading Prabhupada's books, and the importance of that no material situation can block one's relationship with God. And no material situation is actually can restrict one from freedom. Freedom is more a state of consciousness than it is a state of physical environment. Although physical environment is restrictive or not restrictive, still, the more you are connected to Krishna, the more you're free from the physical environment you're in, or at least from the effects of the physical environment you're in. So it's relative to.
Actually, can you elaborate on this part? Like, when you are, as you said, your external environment can be very restrictive, but that restriction is on the movement of your physical body.
Right.
But I think you're saying that the real freedom, when we talk about the freedom that your consciousness affords, you're saying that the freedom comes in terms of how we respond in terms of like attitude
That's
about
part
our
of it.
situation.
That's part of it, but the essence is connecting with Krishna, because the soul is pure and the soul can never be touched by matter. The more we connect with our soul, the more we're revealing its pure nature. And that pure nature sort of dissolves or somehow overshadows our physical situation. And then, the answer is also how we respond to the external environment will be also due to how much we are Krishna conscious.
But the freedom that you're saying that we can experience when we identify more with our soul, that freedom you're saying is actually you're talking about the freedom to experience our relationship with Krishna. Is that specifically the freedom that you're referring to?
Yeah, because when that connection with Krishna means complete freedom. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'll give you an example, which is somewhat similar, and it's the story of a great Greek philosopher. His name was Socrates. And Socrates was preaching against he's preaching different from what the church was preaching at the time. And the church was becoming disturbed. And so they had warned him through the local authorities. They were in a position of rule, that if he didn't stop, then they were going to take some action. But that didn't deter him. He continued. And then finally they arrested him and said, because you are violating, the rules and not following, you're preaching something that's not true, and therefore we sentence you to death by taking poison. So, and then it went on, and then they said to Socrates, what should we do with you once you die? He said, as far as my body is concerned, what should we?
They said what?
What should we do with you once you?
There's so much noise on the line. I don't know.
Muted. Unmuted.
Oh, okay, good. Can you repeat that last part?
Yeah, what should we do with you once you die? And he said, well, as far as my body is concerned, you can do anything you want with it, but as far as I'm concerned, you'd have to catch me. He knew he was different than his body. He had realized
Yes.
he was on Brahman realization.
Uh-huh.
Socrates was Brahman realized.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he knew
Amazing.
he knew whatever happens to his body is not happening to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the same sense, we try to inculcate that consciousness into the inmates that, you know, you're thinking that you're going to be happy when you get out and that's your goal. But now why don't you just get out of the mental chains that are binding you to this place by becoming connected with something that is transcendental, something that is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And not only can you get free, but you're going to experience the qualities of that freedom. In other words, one feels happy. Just like when Haridas Thakur he was put in prison by the Qazi. And while he was in prison, he was speaking to the other inmates. And he was preaching to them, and they developed a real attraction for him and an attachment. Finally, when he was about to be taken out of the prison, he spoke to them. He said, "Stay as you are. Stay as you are." And so they all misunderstood that statement. And then he could understand. They didn't understand. Then he explained, "Stay as you are is now you're becoming Krishna conscious. Stay as you are." Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful explanation, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's all a matter of degree. The more we're Krishna conscious, the less we're affected by the externals. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm. We have to deal with the externals, but we're not disturbed by them or elated by them.
Mm-hmm. 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 Not affected by them.
Yeah, not affected, which means not being disturbed or being overly, what we say, happy about these
elated,
things.
like
Yeah. And Krishna explains that in the Gita, in the 5th chapter. One who is not elated by happiness, or what we say, I don't know, he uses another word for unhappiness. He said that person is situated in transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yes.
The quality is called dhira. The quality is, the word is dhira. Dhira. Dhira means undisturbed.
Okay.
Sometimes we see a big person like that and we think they're uninterested. We take undisturbed as being
Sometimes we see
a person who's not disturbed as being uninterested.
Mm-hmm.
That may look like that, but they are interested in whatever they're doing, but they're not disturbed by the results of the activities.
Yes, right. There's a difference between being uninterested and undisturbed.
Right. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Very well. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Maharaj, this is Shyamasaki.
Shamasaki.
Thank you so much for your class. Very, very relevant and very much needed in society, especially our society, in my life. I had a question, Maharaj. You were talking about the components of a speech, truthful, pleasing, and official.
Yeah. Satyam Priyam.
I was wondering.
Satyam Bruyam.
Yes. I was wondering if you could tell us how you can be conscious of these 3 components. Specifically for myself, I was thinking of being a beneficial part. How we can be conscious to be of these components. It's not like second nature.
No. It's something we have to practice.
Can we pick up the phone so that you don't have to bend?
Something we have to practice.
Please mute the phone. It's difficult to hear the Hare Krishna.
Otherwise, you can use this again.
Yeah,
That will help to.
actually, what the question?
Here. You may have to repeat the question because nobody will hear otherwise.
I practice. Are we connected?
Can you check whether everybody's hearing?
Oh, okay. You can hear me? Yeah, I practice. Yeah, as you say, it's not second nature, but habit is overshadowed by another habit. And habit is second nature. It can be. First nature is our original nature. Second nature is our acquired nature. More like our conditioned nature. And so to recondition means to re-emphasize or emphasize what you want to become like. There's the simple statement, practice makes perfect. If you want to be humble, you have to practice humility. If you want to be expert at doing something, requires practice. And also, in some sense, getting guidance from others. Practice. Is that okay? We are not getting any reception. Nothing.
Still, we can hear you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. It's all Prabhupada's mercy.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Mercy comes from the source of mercy. Krishna is the source of mercy. So, more questions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Please accept my obeisances.
Okay.
Question is.
No, are they asking? No, so just can you remove that? Because
I'm hearing you from here.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. Thank you for the nice class. One question regarding assumptions, expectations, and then when the assumptions is not really true or the expectations are not met, the relationship between the devotee, the family starts falling apart. So how do we control our urge of having expectations from others about our own needs or our own gratification?
How do we communicate that, or how do we
How do we control the need or the urge of having expectations?
Well, in order for any unit to function, certain things have to happen. There has to be some. Uh, there has to be some, what we say, protocol for operations. You can't just come together without some communications about what is expected and then let it go on. So, these expectations, there's unnecessary expectations or expectations that are really not expectations, and then there's those who are, you know, just like it's expected that the wife will cook while the husband comes home from work. And so if she doesn't do that, then there is a lack of fulfillment of expectations, and then there's a breakdown in relationship. If the husband doesn't provide for the needs of the family, then that's an expectation that the other family members will wonder what happened. So, yeah, there are certain things that have to happen, otherwise, the relationship will break down. So, and then there's other things that are what we say false expectations and not necessary. So, you have to be able to discriminate between what is essential and what is extra, or what is not necessary. So, there's always some expectations. Otherwise, how do things function? And if one, just like if you sign a contract to do some work, you know, there has to be people in place to provide the needs and for the work to go on. Otherwise, there's a breakdown in the whole operation. And communication helps to avoid that. Like that. And when you see certain expectations are not being fulfilled, it could be mentioned. But then again, how it's mentioned will make a difference in how it's received, and how whether make a change or not. Mhm. It's the thing is, instead of blaming the person, blame the situation. Someone doesn't fulfill their expectations, you focus on the lack of fulfillment rather than on the person's inability to do it. You know, if somebody does something wrong and you say, "Oh, you're so stupid," you might feel good about that, but that doesn't solve the problem, nor does it make communications, work. But if you focus on, well, this was supposed to be done, and we can see you didn't do this, is there any reason why it didn't happen? There's different ways of making your point. The person might also, you might be right by calling them stupid, but that's not gonna help at all. It's just gonna make the communications break down even farther.
It could make the situation worse at that moment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Anything else? Anywhere? That's it?
On the call, if there are any questions, please continue.
No, they cannot hear me. Okay.
Point that out.
Can you repeat the question, Maharaj, so that it is recorded?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, just, you might feel good about how you express some negativity, but it's not going to help. Not going to help solve the problem. And sometimes that's what happens. And some people don't even care about solving the problem. They just want to say what they want to say. Yeah. So communications is the basis of relationships. And relationships is the principle of life. Life, the happiness we're looking for in life is based on relationships. And that's based on communication. And communication can be done in different ways, not only verbal, but how you behave is another form of communication. That's why that verse we quoted, one should speak truthfully, beneficially, avoid speech that offends, and uh, back up one's statements with higher authority. It can even be done in a day-to-day life. Okay, thank you. Well, Haribol Gail, Hare Krishna. My obeisances to all the listeners out there. All glories to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.